No, it looks like such a warm planet, don't you think?
It does look a little chilly.
It might even be up in, I wonder if any of that is the, what do you call this, in the middle of the night, the colors, the, can we start?
Aurora Borealis?
Yes, can we start this? All right, I'll go with it.
Ah,
So if I want to,
clearly I should have done more research.
reason and the forms of error.
Yay.
The introduction of reason into the ego's thought system is the beginning of the egoic thought system's undoing. For reason and the ego are contradictory. Nor is it possible for reason and the ego to coexist in your awareness. For reason's goal is to make plain and therefore obvious. You can see reason. This is not a play on words, for here is the beginning of a vision that has meaning. Vision is sense, quite literally. If vision is not the body sight, vision must be understood. If vision is not the body's sight, vision must be understood. Okay, so it's not the body sight, in other words, using your eyeballs. It's something other than that. For vision is plain, and what is obvious is not ambiguous. Vision can be understood, and here do reason and the ego separate to go their separate ways. Sound, sound. Woo.
Vision allows us to apply reason to a given experience or awareness. Vision looks past form to the content. The vision of Christ understands content and is not bogged down by the form it may appear within. Content is reduced down to the purpose. There we go. Content is reduced down to the purpose for the awareness. Am I responding out of fear or love? That's what we want to get to. Uh-oh, my finger won't. There we go. What would love have me do? Is this relationship an expression of love or a cry for love? Egoic seeing focuses on bodily form and therefore, excuse me, therefore comes from fear and limitation. That's the thing we don't want to do.
Right.
By focusing on the form, the ego keeps us within the illusion of the dream. We're taking the illusion seriously instead of questioning what is the underlying lesson that this experience would have me learn, and therefore teach. I find the more that I put myself in a situation where it's teaching and learning, the less personally I take some of the crap I have to go through in life.
Amen, brother.
Reason is aware that form is of no consequence to the underlying content. Reason understands that reality must be based on truth, not the illusions that our eyes tease us with. The ego's goal is to maintain the illusion that God's child is limited. Vision, coupled with reason, looks past illusionary form in search of the content. This is the content which supports the truth of the one self.
I have to add here that when I went to school in the last century, our motto, since we were studying the Bauhaus design way of architecture, we had the famous quote that we used all the time: form follows content, form follows function. And actually, form follows function is the same thing as form follows content.
Yep.
We were to design being true to the content and not just any form, this style or that style.
Yeah. Build that library out of books.
Yeah. And so this is not alien to me, coming to this kind of way of looking at the real truth. It's something that the Bauhaus, which changed the whole nature of architecture.
They had to show the truth in order to be able to build the truth, in order to be able to do the truth, in order to be able to strip away all of the stuff that's BS, the overgrowth, and yep, no more fanciful stuff. Just let's get to the point.
And here we are applying it to life. So it's kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
The ego's whole continuance depends on the ego's belief that you cannot learn this course. Share this belief that you cannot learn ACIM, and reason will be unable to see your errors and make way for the correction of your errors. For reason sees through errors, telling you what you thought was real is not. Reason can see the difference between sin and mistakes because reason wants to be corrected. It wants correction. Well, what I read,
I get you.
accident is not correct because reason wants correction is correct. Therefore, reason tells you what you thought was uncorrectable can be corrected. And thus, what you thought was uncorrectable must have been an error, not a sin. The ego's opposition to correction leads to the ego's fixed belief in sin and disregard of errors. The ego looks on nothing that can be corrected. Thus does the ego damn, and reason saves. You know, there are people who are totally guided by their own gut, what they call their gut. And when their gut, which is tantamount to the ego, declares that something is wrong, they disregard any possibility of just an error.
Yeah, no more evidence, please. My gut has told me what's correct without the need. It's yeah. Yep. If sin is real, it requires punishment.
Yeah.
Gut instinct thinks others are sinning and they require punishment.
Right. And that they're intrinsically bad and they cannot be fixed and get away from me and all of this kind of stuff. Reason says, wait a minute, there's more to this story. It's not what you're thinking you see, the form. You have to look at the content, and the gut is not interested in the content.
To the ego, sin requires sin's punishment, since it's very real to the split-minded. Oof. The ego sees the witnesses for sin wherever it looks. The ego has a vested interest in its belief in sin, which is the bedrock of the egoic thought system. When sin arrives, it brings its kissing cousins of guilt and fear. This unholy trinity of sin, guilt, and fear spawns our belief in limitation and victim consciousness. Unlike sin, an error or mistake only requires correction. If we understand that what we thought was a sin is only an error, our guilt and fear also disappear. Reason leads us to the abandonment of the thought system of the ego because it dispels from our awareness any belief in sin, guilt, and fear when it corrects the error.
I don't know exactly what comes next here, but I will tell you that I can see very clearly that in our world today, the unbelievable hate that exists between factions, let's just say, arises from two sets of egos, one on each side, directing their lives, each in its own way, the group in its own way. And all they can do in the end is hate each other.
Yes.
Neither is using reason. There doesn't appear to be yet a place for reason between the disparate groups, whether we're talking about bigotry, whether we're talking about political divisiveness, and a plethora of other things that divide us. It's the hate, which is, of course, the opposite of love. That's what it brings to the world. And our world has a lot of it right now,
Yeah.
especially in our country.
I think vision requires perspective. In order to have the right vision, in order to see your way through, it's really hard to do when you're inside of it. You got to be above it. You got to look around it. You got to see the lay of the land in order to really get a perspective enough to adjust your own thinking so you can find your path through. It's frustrating, but we're
Is
little.
That's right. And I think that this focus on reason is the way to start to break down the hatred that exists,
Let's see.
the
Keep reading.
condition we have in our planet right now in a lot of places.
Let's see.
Okay, reason is not salvation in itself, but reason makes way for peace and brings you to a state of mind in which salvation can be given you. Sin is a block set like a heavy gate, locked and without a key, across the road to peace. No one who looks on sin without the help of reason would try to pass sin's locked gate. The body's eyes behold sin's locked gate as solid granite, so thick it would be madness to attempt to pass sin's blockage. Yet reason sees through sin's locked gate easily, because sin is just an error. And the form the error takes cannot conceal sin's emptiness from reason's eyes.
Reason looks past form to content. Reason knows God did not create sin, for there is no sin in God or his creations. Any thought that would support the belief that God's child could sin must be an error in thinking. This idea can only be an illusion whose source, the thought itself, needs to be corrected. Mistakes only require correction. Reason tells us, nope. Reason tells the thinker, yeah, reason tells us to choose again.
Only the form of error attracts the ego, meaning the ego does not recognize and the ego does not see if the error is there or not. Everything the body's eyes can see is a mistake, an error in perception, a distorted fragment of the whole without the meaning that the whole would give. And yet, mistakes, regardless of their form, can be corrected. Every single one. Sin is but error in a special form the ego venerates. The ego would preserve all errors and make errors into sins. For here, in making errors into sin, is the ego's own stability, the ego's heavy anchor in the shifting world the ego made, the rock on which the ego's church is built. And here, in making errors into sin, is where the ego's worshipers are bound to bodies, believing the body's freedom is their own freedom. This is so pervasive right now in our public, I was going to say awareness, but actually our public confusion between people. Each one is saying to the other, you are the sinners. No, you are the sinners. And there is no reason to separate the two, at least put them in their own corners for a while and let them stop fighting long enough to realize nobody is really sinning here. Let's change the way we're doing life and things can get better using reason. Back to you.
The belief that we're sinners keeps us in victim consciousness. That's the dual side of exactly what you're saying.
Hmm.
Being the victim means we're powerless and we can't change.
Exactly.
Remove that belief that we've sinned and no longer have any reason to fear the truth, in this case, God. Our world of perception was made as a place where our split mind could hide from a God that it now perceived as fearful due to our supposed committing of the original sin, which is the authority problem.
Mm.
When reason transforms sin into a mistake that only requires correction, all fear of punishment is removed. We now have no reason to fear God. Due to our innocence, we once again feel worthy to accept the love of our Creator.
Wow.
Good stuff. Have a wonderful day. We'll pick it up tomorrow.
Okay. Good reading. Thanks, Lee.